The day I found out I was pregnant, my boyfriend was holding a small wedding ceremony with his first love. He explained that her last wish in life was to become his bride. But what about me? What was I in his eyes? In the end, I finally understood that 15 years of waiting and sacrifice from me could never compare to a single tear from his first love. When Ethan Cole slipped the ring onto the bride's finger, the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause. The air was filled with excitement as he lifted the veil from her face. It was also the first time I saw, with my own eyes, the girl he had longed for day and night. Julia Grant, dressed in a pure white wedding gown, was so breathtaking that she seemed to steal the air from the room. In that moment, I couldn't help but feel small and insignificant. The crowd started chanting, "Kiss her, kiss her." Right on cue, Julia stood on her toes, lifted her face, and puckered her lips, waiting. Ethan hesitated, and in the end, he only pressed a kiss to her cheek. That was when he saw me standing under a nearby tree. The ceremony was being held at the hospital, to bring a little romance and gentleness to a place usually solemn and cold. And the man who once said he would love me for the rest of his life, who promised he would give me a perfect wedding, was now holding another woman's hand as they made vows to each other. I just stood there, stunned, my hands and feet turning cold. A breeze swept past, carrying a chill across my face. The ceremony was interrupted because of me. Who is that girl? What is she doing here? Is she here to steal the groom? She's nowhere near as good as the bride. All eyes in the hall turned on me, their brows furrowed, their gazes full of scorn, as if I were ruining their perfect love story. Julia saw me too. She frowned slightly, still so beautiful that she looked like a flawless work of art. Ethan panicked and let go of her hand, as though he wanted to run toward me. But Julia clung to his arm, her eyes glistening with tears as she looked at me weakly. "Ethan, this wedding can't happen without the groom." The man who had always been cold and unwavering suddenly hesitated. He looked at me, but his body leaned toward Julia. What else was there for me to wait for? Staying any longer would only humiliate me. He wasn't going to choose me. I turned around and walked away. Ethan took a few hurried steps after me, but behind him, Julia's hoarse, frantic scream rose above the noise. The entire hall fell into chaos. In the end, he still didn't chase me. I couldn't sleep at all that night, and Ethan didn't come home. Our chat window was still stuck on the last message I had sent him. "Ethan, come home when you're done. I have a surprise for you." I never imagined that before I could give him my surprise, he would deliver the biggest shock of my life. On the day I found out I was pregnant, the man I loved walked into a wedding hall holding another woman's hand. I genuinely believed he was on a business trip. I truly believed he was too busy to reply to my messages. But it turned out he was busy, getting married. He turned all my anticipation and the surprise I had prepared into a joke. The pregnancy test slip in my hand was crushed into a wrinkled ball. It didn't matter anymore. I met Ethan right after he had broken up with Julia. My career and my love life had collapsed at the same time, and somehow, my appearance in his life came with perfect timing. I comforted him, I encouraged him. I stayed by his side through 7 years, from his lowest point to the very peak of his success. 7 years later, he told me he wanted to marry me. I once thought he treated me that way out of gratitude, out of guilt. But he told me he didn't know when it happened. All he knew was that at some point, his eyes landed on me, and from then on, he could never look away again. In that moment, I couldn't describe how I felt. He didn't know that long before that, he had already left his mark on my heart. I had been quietly watching his back for so long, and on that day, my long one-sided love finally blossomed and bore fruit. I thought that I had finally waited long enough to see the clouds part and the bright moon appear. I truly believed that for a while. But Julia Grant's return shattered every illusion I had. It turned out everything was just me lying to myself. He had never forgotten her. When the last ray of sunset disappeared along the edge of the sky, I finally made the decision to leave. I had just finished packing my luggage when I heard a noise outside the door. Ethan Cole walked in, looking completely exhausted. "Emily, that wedding ceremony doesn't count," he said. I stared at him silently without answering. "Julia has ALS," he continued. "She just wanted to be a bride once." In that moment, I didn't know whether the pain in his eyes was because he thought I didn't understand him, or because she was about to leave this world. Maybe it was because of her. He had rarely been sad over anything related to me. When I visited her today, he said, she was wearing a wedding dress and asked me to help her finish the rest of the ceremony. A deep, indescribable sadness clouded his expression. Emily, I couldn't refuse her. She's dying. Refuse? I laughed bitterly. You actually considered refusing? The smile he wore during the ceremony wasn't fake. He had married the girl he dreamed of in his youth, the one he longed for so badly he carried her into his dreams. I asked him, since when did she come back? Was it the day we went to choose our wedding rings? Looking back, everything had shown signs. That day, he received a phone call. He had always been calm and composed, and his career had been soaring for years. He almost never revealed his emotions. But that day, he was distracted, his eyes and brows full of worry and sadness I couldn't understand. He said there was an issue at work he needed to handle immediately. And I believed him. After that, he went on a business trip for a few days, and when he returned, he remained distant and preoccupied. During that time, I tried to make him laugh every day. I truly thought he was going through something difficult, and I wanted to lighten his burden. But the truth was that he had been worrying about another woman. I asked, those days you were on that business trip, you were with her, weren't you? He said nothing. He almost never bothered lying to me, yet this time, because of Julia, he broke that rule. Suddenly, I realized I no longer recognized the man standing in front of me. But the face, the somber eyes, the cold lips, they were undeniably his. I let out a soft, mocking laugh. Ethan Cole? Just forget it. He didn't respond. He just stood there motionless, lips pressed tightly together, his throat moving as if he wanted to say something but couldn't bring himself to speak. I pushed my suitcase forward, intending to walk past him and leave. But he grabbed my wrist, his brows tightened and his voice was hoarse. Emily, don't go. I shook his hand off. I had gone to the hospital earlier, gotten checked and scheduled my surgery. When I walked out into the lobby, I ran right into Julia Grant. She smiled brightly at me and introduced herself as if nothing had happened. Hi, I'm Julia. She was a ballet dancer, tall, graceful, beautiful. Standing next to her made the contrast painfully obvious. Years ago, when Ethan's career fell apart, she left him without hesitation and went abroad to study. Maybe people are always foolish like that. What they can't have becomes the thing they treasure most. That's why Ethan had been hung up on her for so many years. And someone like me, always the one who took the initiative, naturally would never be cherished. I heard from Ethan that you're his fiancée, she said, lifting her chin slightly with a proud little smile. She was showing off. But so what if I was his fiancée? Ethan still held a wedding ceremony with her. He still recited vows of eternal love with her. In her eyes, I was nothing but a joke. The ceremony that day, I'm sure Ethan already explained it to you, she added. I didn't want to talk to her. My mouth tasted bitter, my heart sour. Ethan no longer had anything to do with me. I didn't have the time or desire to fight over a man with someone who was about to die, and I wasn't desperate enough to stoop to something so pathetic. Whatever she wanted, she could have it. I walked away quickly. Julia Grant looked like she wanted to say something and ran after me, but she suddenly tripped and fell. Right at that moment, Ethan Cole appeared. The scene in front of him made his brows tighten. He hurried over to help Julia up, his movements so gentle as if he were afraid of hurting her. But when his eyes turned to me, there was a sharp chill in them, blame, even. Emily, Julia is a patient, he said. Of course, she was a patient. Because she was a patient, he could abandon me the entire night without a single explanation, stay by her side, and leave me alone with my thoughts until the next morning, when he finally said a few meaningless words and begged me not to leave. I had never been his priority. I didn't do anything, I said. Your wife fell on her own. I emphasized the words, your wife, my tone dripping with mockery. His brows furrowed deeper, probably because of my attitude. I had always been gentle with him. All these years, I had never once lost my temper in front of him. Truly pathetic enough to make someone pity me. Julia whispered an apology, but her eyes shimmered with a faint, knowing smile. I fell on my own. It had nothing to do with Emily. Ethan, you know that? Sometimes I can't control my movements. In that moment, I suddenly understood. Julia had always been proud, too proud to bother with petty tricks. She didn't need to. She only had to lift her hand slightly, reveal a bit of vulnerability, and Ethan would rush to her immediately. He still had feelings for her. That was why he couldn't bring himself to resent her for abandoning him back then. In the face of life and death, none of those old wounds mattered anymore. After hearing her words, Ethan froze. His gaze met mine. Then he seemed at a loss for what to say. Julia picked up the orange in his hand and spoke softly. "All right, you two probably have a lot to talk about. I'll head back to my room first. Take your time." That was when I noticed the orange. He had peeled it cleanly. "Let me tell you a ridiculous story. I really love oranges, but Ethan doesn't. Back when we first started dating, he took me to meet his friends. He introduced me to everyone, and that simple action made me feel incredibly secure. At that time, I didn't know what he liked or disliked. Wanting to ease the distance between us, I offered him a slice of orange cake. He froze, lips pressed tight. The air went silent for a few seconds. Everyone stared at me. My palms broke out in sweat. I wondered if I had done something wrong, if I had upset him. Someone finally tried to smooth things over, saying, "Ethan hates the smell of oranges. You didn't know? You owe us a drink." The atmosphere quickly became lively again. But the disappointment inside me lingered. Later, when he was drunk one night, he finally told me the real reason. When he was young, he didn't hate citrus fruit at all. His mother had been weak and had stomach issues, so she was always picky about food. But she loved oranges. Their home always had some on hand. It was during a very cold winter. She peeled an orange for him, kissed him on the cheek, and told him to stay home and wait for her. "Finish this plate of oranges, and I'll come back." That day, he waited until the last bit of sunset disappeared beneath the horizon. He waited as the snow fell harder and harder, rising past his ankles. And in the end, all he got was someone telling him, "Ethan, your mother jumped." She died that winter. Later, when he grew older, he learned the truth. His mother didn't actually like oranges that much. She only bought them because they were cheap and bright in color, a pitiful compromise between illness and poverty. He choked up as he told me that from then on, he never touched oranges or tangerines again. His tears that night were hot as they slid down my skin, and they made me cry with him. I knew oranges reminded him of his mother, of a childhood filled with helplessness and sorrow. That's why afterward, I almost never ate them either. Even perfumes with citrus notes I locked away in the deepest drawer. Until this moment, seeing that orange in his hand, I finally understood that Ethan Cole had become strong enough to. He no longer needed to avoid his past. But I still couldn't become his exception. Everything I sacrificed had never truly mattered to him. He never really cared about what I liked. But he knew Julia Grant liked oranges. All those painful memories, all those old scars, he could set them aside, as long as it was for her. Ethan looked at her with worry. "Do we need to call a nurse?" His concern for her had never been hidden. Julia shrugged and flashed a bright smile. "Ethan, I can walk by myself. You two go ahead and talk." Only then did Ethan turn back to me. "Emily, where did you move to?" Before he could finish his sentence, a loud noise echoed behind us. Julia, who had only taken a few steps, tripped and fell again. Ethan immediately spun around and rushed back to her. I stayed where I was, watching him fuss over her. Watching him frown at the tiny scratch on her hand. "I told you not to walk alone," he murmured softly. "Does it hurt?" His voice was gentle, half scolding, half spoiling her. "Can you still walk?" Julia shook her head. Without hesitating, he lifted her into his arms and carried her in the opposite direction. She wrapped her arms around his neck and looked back at me, smiling triumphantly, her eyes saying clearly, "I win." She used the same trick again. So stupid, yet so effective. My stomach twisted violently. I turned around and ran to the restroom at the end of the hall, vomiting until the world spun. A long while later, Ethan sent me a message. "Emily, why did you come to the hospital? Are you feeling unwell? Wasn't that question a little too late?" Yesterday, he had also forgotten to ask why I appeared at his wedding. I shook my head with a bitter smile, then blocked all contact with him. Eventually, Ethan still found out that I was pregnant. Tracy Mann looked at me with guilt all over her face. "Emily, I'm really sorry. When we get home, I'll teach Lee Stewart a lesson myself." From the other end of the line, Lee shouted, "Emily, you two have been together for so many years. Give Ethan a chance. Give the baby a chance too." Tracy scolded him while trying to snatch the phone from his hand. "Shut up, Lee." Then she yelled into the phone, "Ethan really can't do anything right. Good thing you're so patient, Emily. If it were me, I swear, I'd break his damn arm and let him and Julia be a crippled couple for the rest of their lives. Perfect soulmates." It was ridiculous, but funny. Tracy was my closest friend, and Lee was Ethan's childhood buddy. They got together because Ethan and I introduced them. It took them only 2 years to reach their happy ending. They had just registered their marriage a few days ago. All that was left was the wedding ceremony. Meanwhile, after 7 years of entanglement between Ethan and me, this was our ending. Ethan still rushed over. He was drenched in sweat, looking exhausted. When he saw me still sitting in front of the operating room door, his brows finally relaxed. He pulled me into a tight hug, so tight it felt like if he loosened even a little, I would disappear. "Emily," he said, voice shaking, "I was wrong. Don't be impulsive. Let's sit down and talk, okay?" He smelled faintly of tobacco. Ethan rarely smoked. His father had died of lung cancer, so he avoided cigarettes as much as possible. He only smoked when he was truly overwhelmed. Recently, he had been running all over the place for Julia, looking for doctors, searching for treatment plans. So much so that people even approached me asking, "Are you feeling all right these days?" They genuinely thought I was the one he was so worried about. How laughable. The smell of jasmine perfume was even stronger than the tobacco. I had smelled that same scent on Julia at the hospital the other day. That was when I suddenly remembered, back in our 2nd year together, also the 5th year since we first met, Ethan's father passed away. Right after that, his company ran into financial trouble. At the time, Ethan barely slept at all. I was so worried about him, so I asked a doctor to prescribe some herbal medicine to help him sleep, then requested half a day off so I could go home and prepare it for him. I stayed by the pot, waiting and waiting until late into the evening. And what I received in return was a single message. "Emily, I need some time alone. Don't worry. I'm going out for a walk. I'll be back in a few days." The jasmine scent lingering on him back then suddenly made sense. He had already gone to find Julia. He had gone to the only person who could comfort him. What was even more ridiculous was that when I asked why he smelled like that, he handed me a bottle of perfume. "I bought it for you. The sales clerk sprayed a little on me. I thought you'd like it." Even when he stepped out to clear his head, he still remembered to buy me a gift. I foolishly believed he really loved me. All the misunderstandings I had felt earlier vanished instantly. After that, our relationship progressed quickly. He loved holding me, burying his face into my neck. It wasn't until today that I finally understood he didn't love me that much. He loved the jasmine scent on me. And I had no idea I'd been turned into Julia's substitute. A terrible substitute. Other than that scent, I had nothing in common with her. I pushed myself out of his arms and slapped him hard across the face. He froze, raising a hand to his cheek, as if he didn't even know how to react. Tracy stared at me in shock. "Emily, what's wrong with you?" I covered my mouth and ran to the bathroom. I threw up until everything around me spun, until it felt like my heart and lungs would come out of my throat. Tracy handed me a bottle of water and kept patting my back. "Why are you vomiting this badly? God, this is miserable." Ethan stood at the doorway, his pain written all over his face. The red marks from my fingers were still on his pale cheek. I glared at him and snapped, "Do you have any idea how sick you make me feel?" "That perfume," I said through clenched teeth. "You chose that exact scent on purpose because it smells like Julia, didn't you?" "Of course you knew what I meant." His face went completely white. "When you were doing all that," I continued, "what were you thinking? How could you not find yourself disgusting?" "Emily, listen to me," he said quietly. "Back then I didn't understand. I thought it was that scent that calmed me. But later I realized, the person who makes me feel at peace is you. Emily, I truly want to marry you." I let out a cold laugh. "Fine. Choose. Either Julia disappears from our lives completely, or we cut all ties starting now. Never show yourself in front of me again." Ethan stiffened. He really seemed to be thinking about it. Tracy shouted, "What are you hesitating for?" "Obviously, the answer is Emily. You two have known each other 7 years and been together 4. Have you forgotten everything? But Ethan didn't see it the same way. He murmured, "But she's dying, Emily. She's dying. She's a ballet dancer and she has ALS. Do you know how desperate that feels?" His words felt like mockery. Julia was losing her life, but I was losing my love. Ridiculous. "Ethan," I said, "you're my boyfriend. Are you pitying her so much you had to marry her? Pitying her so much you ignored my feelings, abandoned me over and over so you could run to her? You clearly still have feelings for her. This isn't pity. Even you can't tell the difference, can you? You're using her illness as an excuse to hide the fact you still can't let her go. How convenient." Ethan said nothing. His fists tightened so hard his knuckles turned white, yet he still couldn't give me an answer. At that moment, his phone rang sharply, shattering the suffocating silence. He answered. The background was chaotic and loud. Someone screamed, "Ethan, hurry. Julia's trying to kill herself. She doesn't want to live anymore." He immediately panicked. At that exact moment, a nurse called me into the operating room. The truth was, he had already made his choice. I let out a faint, bitter laugh. "Go, don't let her really die. Otherwise you'll resent me forever. Being hated by someone like you, that's truly a curse." Ethan looked at me with pleading eyes. "Emily, please, wait for me to come back before you decide anything. I'm the father of the child. We should make this decision together." I curled my lips, my nails digging deep into my palm. 7 years, all of it, wasted like feeding scraps to a dog. Another call came through, the person on the other end urging him anxiously. Tracy exploded, shouting, "Ethan, do you even have a conscience?" His face clearly showed panic. He was truly afraid Julia might actually jump. Tracy gritted her teeth. "Julia is a manipulator. How can you not see through her stupid little tricks?" How could he not? Ethan wasn't stupid. He was indulging her. He was terrified that even a 1 in 1,000 chance she might really die could be true. "Emily, wait for me," he begged. "Wait for me and we'll decide together, okay?" I didn't respond. He turned to Tracy and pleaded, "Tracy, please watch her. Don't let her go into the operating room." Tracy yelled straight at him, "Look at yourself. Are you even a man anymore?" I told her, "Hold on," then twisted open the half-full bottle of mouthwash in my hand and poured the rest of it over Ethan's head. "Ethan Cole," I said coldly, "we're done. Don't ever come looking for me again." Water streamed down his face, dripping to the floor. He looked stupid, pitiful even. It splashed into his eyes, turning them red. He stared at me blankly, whispered a hoarse, "I'm sorry," then ran off in a panic. Watching him flee like that only made me realize how utterly defeated I had become. Tracy stomped her foot in fury. "That bastard." After cursing him out, she turned to me. "Emily, are you okay?" "I'm fine." I really was. I never expected him to choose me anyway. Even if he had, even if Julia completely vanished from our lives, we could never go back to what we were. A broken mirror can't be made whole again. Before heading into the operating room, I sent Ethan a few messages. "If you want a child, there are plenty of women willing to give birth for you. But in this world, there is only one Julia Grant. I want you to remember that this child was killed by you and Julia together. I want you to remember that you once pressed your ear against my belly and asked me, 'Emily, do you want a boy or a girl?' You're the one who said you wanted a child, and you're the one who abandoned it. The pain of killing your own child, there's nothing worse than that." The surgery ended quickly. When I woke up, Lee Stewart was there. I suddenly remembered something. "Lee," I said, "there are 2 wedding rings in my purse. Help me return them to Ethan. Those rings were meaningless from the start. He was thinking about Julia when he chose them. There was never any sincerity in it. I don't want them." Lee nodded and left. Tracy sat beside me. "Emily, Ethan doesn't deserve you." I knew she was aware that Julia had intentionally leaked my pregnancy to Lee. 7 years aren't easy to let go of, and she had once thought that everything between Ethan and me was just a misunderstanding caused by Julia showing up. But she didn't know they had held an entire wedding ceremony. She didn't know how many times Ethan had abandoned me because of Julia. Now she understood it all. Lee had sent her a video. Tracy didn't hide it from me. She played it right in front of me. In the video, Ethan was holding Julia tightly as the 2 of them cried uncontrollably. Julia sobbed, "I don't want to stay in the hospital anymore. It's suffocating. I hate it here." Ethan said gently, "Okay, I'll do whatever you want." She cried harder. "I want to see the world. I want to dance ballet one more time. I want to." Her voice broke before she could finish. Ethan kept nodding, agreeing to everything. He closed his eyes, tears running down his face. "See that?" Tracy whispered. "Touching, isn't it? Fate. It really was cruel, these two tragic lovers, these unfortunate soulmates." Watching the video made me want to throw up. Tracy showed it to me on purpose, to force me to cut things off completely. She'd always been the clear-headed one. When the post-surgery observation period ended, Lee Stewart and Tracy Mann took me home. The moment I got into the car, Ethan Cole showed up, holding the ring box I had returned. His eyes looked lost. "Emily, did you really get rid of the baby?" Tracy frowned. "Why are you acting like you're the victim? Weren't you the one who pushed her to this point?" I asked quietly. "Where's Julia? Asleep?" "If she wasn't, how would he have the time to come here?" Ethan didn't answer. That alone was confirmation. I laughed. "If you're that devoted to her, then go die with her, and don't ever appear in front of me again." The moment those words left my mouth, the vacant look in his eyes shattered. Pain, guilt, sorrow, everything flooded out at once. His eyes turned red. I said nothing more. My lower abdomen still ached. Every breath had to be shallow. Tracy grew furious and scolded him directly. "You have to clear out your heart before the next person can live in it. You really don't understand something that simple? Emily waited for you for 7 years. And what about that Julia? She left you. Yet you're still chasing after her? Are you stupid? Emily's sincerity was wasted on you, completely wasted." Ethan didn't argue. Tracy reached to close the car door, but he put his hand out to stop it. "She'll be out of our lives," he said. Tracy's eyes widened. She let out a cold laugh. "Really? A minute ago, didn't you promise to take her traveling around the world? Impressive, lying to one girl, then turning around to lie to another. You're that greedy, huh? I'm closing the door now. If you crush your hand, don't blame us. Don't you need to go save your precious ex?" But Ethan still didn't move. No matter how much Tracy cursed him, he refused to let go. Lee got out of the car and quietly told him, "Ethan, go. You've gone way too far this time. Don't make me punch you." Ethan stared only at me. "Emily, everything I said to her earlier was just to calm her down. I'll make things clear to her, I swear." He opened the ring box and held up the women's ring in front of me. "We can go back to how we were. We can get married. We can still have kids." Lee kept shaking his head, then pried Ethan's fingers off the door, one by one. Ethan's lips trembled, his throat bobbed, but he couldn't get a single word out. His eyes were filled with desperate pleading. The engine started. I glanced into the rearview mirror. Ethan was still standing there, staring in my direction long after we drove away. When he chose to abandon me, he already knew the consequences. All this pain he was showing now, he was performing it for me. Tracy followed my gaze and scoffed. "Pathetic. What's with that fake devotion?" In the days after, I stayed in my rented apartment to recover. Tracy visited often. She told me Ethan was pestering Lee every single day, begging for my address. "I'm going insane," she complained. I just smiled faintly and took another spoonful of orange pudding. Then one day I received a phone call from Julia Grant. She wanted to meet and talk. I agreed without hesitation. When I arrived at the cafe, she was already sitting there. And ignoring all the hatred between us, Julia really was the kind of woman people turned to look at. She was stunning. She said, "Thank you for taking care of Ethan all these years." I tucked my hair behind my ear and smiled. "Do you know what you look like right now? Like a thief gloating over her stolen goods. You took someone else's years of effort, didn't feel embarrassed at all, and you're even happy about it. Honestly, it's pathetic. Some things, if left unsaid, would just suffocate inside me." Julia stirred her coffee. Her expression didn't show the slightest discomfort. "Love isn't the same as growing vegetables," she said casually. "I'm about to die anyway, so everything I once missed out on, I want to take it all back. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for having 7 years and still failing to win his heart." As she said that, she lifted her chin proudly, a bright, arrogant smile spreading across her face. She looked exactly like a conqueror. It was clear she truly believed that her death would seal her love with Ethan forever, turning it into some eternal memory, making her the irreplaceable, tragic note in his heart. I laughed. "You're so naive. You're dying. What can you possibly hold on to? If you're really that capable, then make sure Ethan never marries anyone else. Drag him down to the afterlife with you. Julia, I added softly, I know the living can never compete with the dead. But after you die, can you be so sure he won't meet another Moonlight, someone who resembles you just as much? She knew Ethan's value better than I did. Handsome, wealthy, successful, someone women would swarm around. Her confident smile froze midair. I sprinkled more salt on the wound. So tell me, after you die, do you think he'll come begging me to take him back? She hadn't asked me out just to flaunt her victory. She was afraid. Recently, Ethan had been searching everywhere for me, switching through countless numbers to call me. She definitely knew about all of it. She wanted to test my attitude, maybe even disgust me enough to make me give up completely. But too bad for her. I had long stopped caring. I smiled faintly. If I never go back, what do you think will happen? Will he remember the dead girl for years, or crave the one who's still alive, the one he keeps running into but can never reach? Like me? I sipped the bitter coffee. Julia, you know better than I do. Ethan is a mess. His feelings for you, is it love can't attain or love he can't let go of? Even you're not sure, are you? She pressed her lips tightly, unable to answer. Clearly even she didn't know. It's best if you died beautifully in his heart, I said quietly. Maybe then he'll remember you for a few more years. With that final piece of advice, I stood up to leave. She looked like a rose withering at the end of its life, still desperately sucking love out of others, trying to prove she once existed, trying to pretend she mattered. Pathetic. Let them continue writing their grand love story, one that triumphs over life and death, enough to move the heavens. I'm no longer part of it. After some time recovering, I accepted an offer from a headhunting firm and moved to a new job. This city is neither too big nor too small, just big enough that people who have said goodbye rarely cross paths again. Thinking back, I was truly foolish. When I first met Ethan, I quit my job just to support him, and only after his career stabilized did I return to my field. Professionally speaking, that period was precious experience, but it disrupted my entire career path. Now that I look back, my sincerity really was tossed to the dogs. Months passed peacefully. One day, Tracy Mann came to my place with her wedding invitation. Their wedding had been delayed for many reasons, again and again, but they finally settled on this winter. Ethan will be there too, Tracy said carefully. Will you be okay with that? If you don't want to, I'll just tell Lee to stay away from him, I said. Lee and Ethan had known each other for years. They'd promised to be each other's best man. I couldn't ruin their wedding just because of my mess. I shook my head. Don't worry about me. As long as the two of you are happy on your wedding day, that's enough. Soon the wedding day arrived. Ethan was the groomsman, walking right behind Lee to pick up the bride. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, looking almost exactly the way he had the first time we met. Maybe he'd forgotten, but I still remembered. It was an autumn day. I had failed my graduate school entrance exam. Job hunting season looked hopeless. I was sitting in the small pavilion on the hill behind campus, suddenly overwhelmed with memories of my mother. If she were still alive, she would have cooked braised pork for me, made sure I was fed, then gently told me to keep going. But she wasn't alive anymore. Standing on that hilltop, there was a moment, just a moment, when I wanted to throw myself off and end everything. And right then, I saw Ethan Cole. Back then, he had just succeeded in his first business venture. He wore a suit filled with confidence and ambition. Standing next to me, he casually said, "This is the best view in the whole school. You can even see a rainbow." I looked in the direction he pointed, and there it was, a vivid, breathtaking rainbow across the sky. My heart suddenly felt lighter. The weight I'd been carrying for so long lifted just a little. Maybe it was just one offhand sentence from him, but I remembered it for years. It wasn't until 3 years later that I met him again. And after that, we were entangled for 7 long years. But unlike back then, he now looked exhausted and worn out. He spotted me too. Even with the lively wedding atmosphere around us, he just stood there quietly, his eyes complicated and unreadable. I leaned to help Tracy adjust the layers of her gown, using the moment to avoid his gaze. Lee carried Tracy down the stairs. It was an old apartment building. No elevator, only a narrow staircase. There were a lot of people around, A child accidentally bumped into me. I rarely wore heels, so my ankle twisted, and I nearly fell until Ethan grabbed me. The moment he touched me, I smelled cigarette smoke and the familiar jasmine scent on him. A wave of nausea rose instantly. As soon as I steadied myself, I shoved him away. "Don't touch me." He stumbled back a few steps, steadying himself against the railing. His eyes lowered, lips pressed tight, a faint look of hurt flashing across his face. The spot where he'd touched me crawled with goosebumps. "Emily, be careful. Watch your steps," he said softly, the same gentle tone as before, like we were still something to each other. I didn't respond. I turned and walked straight down. When we reached the hotel, I realized Julia Grant was there too. She sat in a wheelchair, bare-faced, her lips pale, still the same fragile, pitiful appearance as always. She called out, "Ethan?" He frowned, very slightly, almost imperceptibly, but he still rushed toward her. Tracy shot a glare at Lee. Lee immediately shook his head. "I didn't invite her. Not me." Then he sneaked a glance at me and muttered, "Maybe she's scared Ethan will get stolen away. Thieves are always afraid of meeting another thief." I raised a brow. "I'm not her colleague," Lee shrugged. "When someone's heart is dirty, they assume everyone else is just like them." Tracy gave a cold laugh. "Fine, if she wants to be shameless, then don't blame me for being impolite." Soon, the auspicious moment arrived. Love Story played as the wedding march. Tracy, in her pristine white gown, slowly walked toward Lee. My eyes stung unexpectedly. At some point, Ethan had walked up beside me. He held out a tissue. I didn't take it. That was when I noticed the wedding ring still on his ring finger. Fake devotion. He barely cared when choosing the rings, yet after we broke up, he insisted on wearing his, just to act like some tragic lover. Julia wheeled herself forward. "Ethan?" We still didn't exchange rings that day. But Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he turned to look at me, as if searching for some trace of sadness or regret on my face. But he had already prepared himself for disappointment. I looked at the couple on stage, hugging each other with radiant smiles as the crowd cheered, "Kiss, kiss." Ethan lowered his gaze and said softly, "The one standing on that stage should have been us, shouldn't it?" His voice was quiet, so soft it was almost swallowed by the noise. But I heard it, and Julia heard it too. Her lips trembled violently. She knew exactly who the us referred to, him and me. Back then, Tracy had once suggested that the four of us hold a double wedding. At the time, everyone was in love and happy, so we all agreed. I didn't expect Ethan would still remember something so trivial. Honestly, he was unbelievable, always having one eye on his fiancée and the other on someone else. I shifted to the side just as the bridal bouquet flew through the air, landing perfectly on Julia's head. Tracy grabbed the microphone from the MC. "Oh, why did the bouquet land on you? I thought you already had your wedding, didn't you? Said you had a terminal illness, only wanted to be a bride once, so you snatched someone else's fiancé and before even signing a marriage certificate, forced a man to hold a whole ceremony with you. Impressive. Truly, next-level tactics." Human nature loves drama. The guests stuffing themselves at the tables immediately lifted their heads, searching for the main character of the gossip. I stepped back again. Julia clutched the bouquet, her face pale. Whispering spread quickly throughout the room. Some people even pulled out their phones. "Oh my God, she's gorgeous, but she's the mistress? She looks more like a cunning fox spirit. Terminal illness doesn't justify stealing someone's fiancé. That poor girl, the groom almost got stolen before the ceremony. That guy is trashed too. What a shameless pair." Lee pretended to cough loudly. Tracy shot me a look, then handed the mic back to the MC. She was venting on my behalf. Back at her wedding, I had endured the same thing, her relatives pointing at me, whispering insults. Julia panicked now, not knowing what to do. Instinctively, she lifted her head to look for Ethan, hoping he would help her. But Ethan only looked at me, opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again. "Ethan." Julia's voice cracked. She quickly lowered her gaze, eyes reddening, then turned her wheelchair around and fled. What surprised me was that Ethan didn't chase her. "Emily," he said, "I never registered our marriage. I really regret everything. There's a saying, when someone is sick for a long time, even filial children grow weary. Let alone someone who once abandoned him. Whatever longing or unresolved feelings he once had for Julia, they had been worn away by time. The moonlight in his heart The perfect girl he idolized had already started to fade, becoming nothing but leftover cold rice at the bottom of the pot. Tracy burst out laughing. You're not going after her? What if she threatens to kill herself again? And if she actually dies, that'll be such a headache. I don't want to be framed as an accomplice to suicide. Ethan gave me a deep look before turning away. Tracy snorted. That Julia really has terrible taste. Just looking at her gives me bad luck. Lee wrapped an arm around her waist and stroked her belly. Calm down, honey. Don't let this stress you out or affect the baby. Tracy huffed. From now on, don't ever hang around people like Ethan again. Okay, Lee replied. I'll listen to you. Later, I heard that Julia had gone missing. Tracy was eating cherries washed by Lee while scoffing. Another stunt. Who does she think she is? The more she pulls this crap, the more annoyed Ethan will get. I laughed softly. She's not acting? That's fear. I'd heard that once ALS reaches the mid-stage, even basic daily functions become impossible without help. Julia was scared. She didn't want Ethan to see her in her most miserable, broken state. She wanted to die with the last beautiful memory she had left, looking like the same radiant girl he once loved. Compared to dragging each other through suffering until the bitter end, she wanted him to live in guilt. Only then would he remember her a little longer. It seemed everything I'd told her at that cafe, she had taken to heart. Later, Tracy told me more. Ethan eventually found Julia. Because of her despair, she stopped actively receiving treatment, causing her illness to progress quickly. Ethan was consumed with guilt, driven nearly mad by it. In the end, he really decided to take her, traveling around the world like she wanted. But a company can't be abandoned forever. Not long after, someone took over his position as CEO. Winter passed, spring came, spring faded into autumn, and by the following winter, Julia died. Tracy sighed. Honestly, Julia was pitiful too, a beautiful girl with a tragic fate. If she hadn't done all that disgusting, manipulative crap, maybe I would have actually felt sorry for her. I thought for a moment, then said, me too. It wasn't about feeling noble, just the kind of sympathy women sometimes have for each other. Not long after that, because of one bad business decision, Ethan's company suffered heavy losses. He was completely tangled up in the mess. Tracy retold it with way too much delight. That crappy company was doomed eventually anyway. Without our Emily, how the hell would he have risen so fast? I nodded repeatedly while reviewing a project on my computer. Good thing I bailed early. But in the end, Ethan still found his way to me. The truth was, he had tracked down my address long ago. One night, I got up to use the bathroom. Out of habit, I glanced out the window, and I saw him standing downstairs. Yellow streetlight cut across his shoulders, casting a long, lonely shadow. I had no idea how long he'd been there. Cigarette butts formed a thick ring at his feet. I immediately pulled the curtains shut. This time, he looked much thinner. Even though he was dressed neatly, he couldn't hide his exhaustion. And on his ring finger, the wedding ring, he still refused to take off. Emily, can I come in for a bit? He asked. I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. Say whatever you need to say here. Seeing how firm I was, he didn't insist. Emily, I miss you. He sighed, voice heavy. When Julia died, it didn't hurt me the way I thought it would. But every single day without you, I felt miserable. See that, Julia? Do you still think you won? Ethan took out the women's ring again. Emily, I can't live without you. Without you, how am I supposed to keep going? He was still dreaming. Back at the hospital, I didn't accept that ring. And now I never would, I said coldly. So what? The moonlight in your heart died, and now you suddenly remember a plain bowl of rice like me? Maybe he did have some real affection mixed in with his begging. But much more than that, he had realized my value. He wanted me with him to rebuild everything from scratch. But the situation he was in, he created it himself. No one else was to blame. Ethan frowned. Emily, don't be like this. You're not that kind of person. I shrugged. I speak human language to humans, dog language to dogs. Tracy and I are the same kind of woman. I only hid my claws because I loved you. Guests nearby turned their heads toward us. Ethan's voice grew firmer. 7 years together, you can't just say let go and actually let go. I laughed softly and shook my head. Letting go is exactly what I do best. You're the one lying to yourself. Ethan, do you really think everyone is as unfaithful and fickle as you? He pressed his lips together. I never legally married Julia, I scoffed. And? You want me to clap for you? Like, wow, good job, you held your ground? Amazing. He tried to belittle his feelings for her just to inflate whatever he claimed to feel for me. The more Ethan Cole talked like that, the more nauseated I became. All those lines like "I can't live without you," hadn't he said the exact same things to Julia? If I agreed to go back to him, then next time he met another woman, he'd whisper the same nonsense to her too. We had dragged things on for far too long. It wasn't until Julia returned to the country that I finally saw his true face clearly. I pretended to close the door. Sorry, I need to go fix my makeup. My boyfriend is waiting. Ethan froze, stunned. He didn't believe me. Oh, you don't believe it? I arched a brow, smirking. Then go to the balcony and look for yourself. That Lamborghini downstairs? The driver is my boyfriend, taller than you, better looking than you, and younger than you. He actually walked to the end of the hallway and leaned over the railing to look down. His face instantly turned ashen, like all the color had been drained from it. I slammed the door shut. Right then, my phone lit up, and the cheerful voice of a new intern came through. Emily, when will I finally get to be promoted to full-time?